He tossed the pen onto the mahogany table and laughed in her face. "You're nothing without me, Isabella. A broke, pathetic waitress I picked up out of pity." Liam Rutherford thought he had won. He thought signing those divorce papers meant he was free to marry his mistress and keep his millions. He didn't know that the woman sitting quietly across from him wasn't just a waitress. She was the sole heiress to the Sterling Empire, and the old man walking through the door wasn't a stranger. He was the billionaire who was about to turn Liam's world into dust. Buckle up. You aren't ready for this level of revenge. The conference room on the 45th floor of the Rutherford & Co. building smelled of expensive leather and stale ambition. Outside, the gray New York skyline loomed, but inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Isabella Hart sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple, slightly worn beige cardigan and jeans that had seen better days. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, a stark contrast to the sharp, aggressive decor of the office. Opposite her sat Liam Rutherford, the man she had loved for 3 years, the man she had nursed through a severe bout of pneumonia, and the man who was currently checking his Rolex Submariner with an expression of bored irritation. "Just sign the damn papers, Bella," Liam said, his voice dripping with condescension. He didn't even look at her. He was too busy typing a text message on his phone. A small, cruel smile played on his lips as he hit send. "Tiffany is waiting for me at Le Bernardin. We're celebrating." Isabella felt a sharp pang in her chest, but her face remained impassive. "Celebrating your divorce? That's tacky. Even for you, Liam." Liam finally looked up, his blue eyes cold and hard. "Celebrating my freedom, and the fact that I'm finally shedding the dead weight. God, look at you. You look like a tragic charity case. I don't know how I tolerated it for this long." Sitting next to Liam was his lawyer, a man named Simon Leach, who lived up to his surname. Leach pushed the document toward Isabella. "Mrs. Rutherford, Miss Hart, soon please. The settlement is more than generous. $5,000. That's enough to get you a bus ticket back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of." Isabella looked at the papers. "The prenuptial agreement," she said softly. "You insisted on it, Liam. Do you remember?" "Of course I remember," Liam scoffed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. "I had to protect my assets. My tech startup was taking off. I couldn't have a gold digger like you coming after my future millions. Best decision I ever made." "The startup," Isabella murmured. "Nexus Dynamics." "Yes, Nexus Dynamics. The company I built. The company that just secured a Series B funding round of $50 million. You think you deserve a piece of that? Because you made me soup when I was sick?" He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Sign the papers, Bella. Take the $5,000. Don't make me embarrass you in court." Isabella picked up the pen. It was a heavy, black Mont Blanc. She remembered buying it for him for his birthday 2 years ago, using money she had saved from her tips at the diner. He hadn't even said thank you back then. "I'm not asking for your money, Liam," Isabella said, her voice steadying. "I just want you to admit one thing. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a placeholder until you found someone who fit your image better?" Liam sighed, rolling his eyes. "You were convenient, Bella. You were docile. You cooked, you cleaned, you didn't ask questions. But let's be real. I'm a CEO now. I need a woman like Tiffany. She's a model. She has connections. She knows how to dress. You're just plain, boring. Now sign." Isabella looked down at the paper. "Dissolution of marriage." She didn't hesitate. She signed her name in a fluid, elegant script. Isabella Marie Hart. As soon as the ink touched the paper, Liam snatched the document away, grinning like a shark. He held it up, inspecting it. Finally, he breathed. "Done. Leach, file this immediately. I want the decree absolute by the end of the week." "Consider it done, Mr. Rutherford," Leach said, stuffing the papers into his briefcase. Liam stood up, buttoning his custom-tailored Italian suit jacket. He looked at Isabella with pure mockery. "Well, Bella, it's been underwhelming. You have 24 hours to get your junk out of my penthouse. Anything left behind goes in the incinerator." "It's not your penthouse, Liam," Isabella said quietly. remaining seated. Liam paused, a confused frown creasing his forehead. Then he laughed again. Delusional to the end. I pay the mortgage. It's my name on the mailbox. You pay the mortgage with the salary from the company, Isabella corrected. But the deed? You never checked the deed closely, did you? What are you babbling about? Liam checked his watch again. I'm leaving. Security will escort you out. He reached for the door handle. That was when the heavy oak doors of the conference room swung open, not from the inside, but from the outside. They opened with such force that they banged against the walls, silencing the room instantly. Two massive bodyguards in dark suits stepped in, flanking the doorway. And then he walked in. The man was in his late 60s, but he carried himself with the vigor of a man half his age. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than Liam's car. His silver hair was swept back, and his eyes, steely, intelligent, and currently blazing with fury, were the exact same shade as Isabella's. It was Harrison Sterling. Liam froze. His mouth fell open. He knew this face. Everyone in the business world knew this face. Harrison Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Global, a conglomerate that owned everything from shipping lines to pharmaceutical companies. He was a billionaire several times over, a man who could crush companies with a phone call. Mr. Sterling, Liam stammered, his arrogance instantly replaced by a sycophantic tremble. I didn't know you were in the building. Do we have a meeting? My secretary didn't. Harrison Sterling didn't even look at Liam. He walked straight past him, ignoring his outstretched hand, and went directly to Isabella. To Liam's horror, the terrifying billionaire softened immediately. He reached out and gently took Isabella's hands in his. I'm sorry I'm late, Bella, Harrison said, his voice deep and gravelly. Traffic in Midtown was a nightmare. Are you all right, sweetheart? Isabella stood up and kissed the older man on the cheek. I'm fine, Daddy. Just tying up some loose ends. Daddy. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. He staggered back, bumping into the conference table. Daddy? He whispered. No, that's impossible. Her name is Hart. She's a waitress. Harrison Sterling slowly turned around to face Liam. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a glacial coldness that made Simon Leach, the lawyer, physically shrink into the corner. Hart is her mother's maiden name, Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. She used it because she wanted to find someone who loved her for who she was, not for my money. She wanted to build a life based on trust and hard work. Harrison took a step toward Liam. I was against it. I told her that men are greedy. I told her that if she hid her identity, she'd attract bottom feeders. But she insisted. She said, Liam is different, Dad. He has a vision. He works hard. So, against my better judgment, I let her play her game. Liam was shaking his head, his mind racing, trying to connect the dots. But, the money. We were broke. We ate ramen for months. If she was a Sterling, she lived on your budget because she respected you. Harrison spat. She wanted to be your partner. But do you really think a 24-year-old nobody gets approved for a Series A funding round from Vanguard Capital without a guarantor? Liam's eyes widened. Vanguard. That was my first big break. They funded Nexus Dynamics when no one else would. Vanguard Capital is a subsidiary of Sterling Global, Harrison revealed, his voice dripping with disdain. I approved that loan. Not because your business plan was good, it was mediocre at best, but because my daughter asked me to give her husband a chance. Isabella stepped forward, standing beside her father. She looked different now. The slouch was gone. She stood tall, radiating a quiet power that she had hidden for years. And the contracts with the logistics firms? Isabella asked, tilting her head. The ones that saved your quarter last year? Sterling Logistics, Liam whispered, feeling like he was going to vomit. Exactly, Isabella said. My wedding present to you. I pulled strings behind the scenes for 3 years, Liam. Every major success you've had, every door that opened miraculously for you, I held the key. Liam looked at the divorce papers on the table. The papers he had just practically forced her to sign. The papers that gave her $5,000 and cut all legal ties. Wait, Liam gasped, a desperate idea forming. He lunged for the table. The papers! I haven't filed them yet. We can tear them up. Bella, baby, listen. Harrison Sterling's bodyguard moved faster than light, blocking Liam's path with a chest like a concrete wall. You wanted them signed, Harrison said coldly. They are signed. But I didn't know, Liam pleaded, looking at Isabella. Bella, you lied to me. This is entrapment. You can't do this. I love you. I was stressed. Tiffany means nothing to me. Isabella laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Tiffany. The woman you bought a Cartier bracelet for using the company credit card? The company that my father effectively owns? I can explain, Liam sweated. There is nothing to explain, Harrison interrupted. You wanted a divorce. You have it. But now, we have business to discuss. Since you are no longer family, the protection I provided is withdrawn. Immediately. What does that mean? Liam asked, his voice trembling. It means, Harrison said, checking his own watch, a Patek Philippe, that as of 5 minutes ago, Sterling Global has called in its loans to Nexus Dynamics. All of them. You can't do that, Liam shrieked. The terms. We have 30 days. Read the fine print of your loan agreement, Mr. Rutherford, Harrison said calmly. The morality clause. Or perhaps the change of control clause. Since my daughter, who was acting as silent guarantor, is no longer your wife, the risk assessment has changed. The loans are due, in full, today. That's $50 million, Liam screamed. I don't have $50 million in cash. Then I suppose we will have to seize the collateral, Harrison said simply, which, if I recall, is the intellectual property of Nexus Dynamics and your personal assets. Liam turned to his lawyer. Leach, do something. Say something. Simon Leach was busy packing his briefcase. I'm afraid, Mr. Rutherford, that I cannot represent you in a conflict against Sterling Global. It's a conflict of interest. My firm does their retainer work. I resign. Leach scurried out the door, leaving Liam alone with the wolves. You have 24 hours to vacate the penthouse, Isabella said, echoing his earlier words. Actually, make it 2. I'm having the locks changed. The deed is in a trust, Liam, the Sterling family trust. You were just a guest. Liam fell back into his chair, completely defeated. But then, a flicker of malice returned to his eyes. He pulled out his phone. You think you can destroy me? Liam snarled. I still have the prototype, the new AI chip. It's on my private server. If you bankrupt me, I'll sell it to your competitors. I'll sell it to XingTech. Isabella smiled. It was a terrifying smile. The prototype? You mean the one you've been developing with your lead engineer, Marcus Thorne? Yes. Marcus is loyal to me. Marcus, Isabella said, pulling out her own phone, is my cousin. The silence in the conference room was deafening after the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind Isabella and her father. Liam Rutherford stood alone, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the mahogany table. The divorce papers signed, sealed, and lethal lay in the center like a detonated bomb. This isn't happening, Liam muttered to himself, pacing the room. This is a nightmare. I'm Liam Rutherford. I'm a tech visionary. I don't lose. He lunged for his phone, his fingers fumbling as he dialed his lead engineer. He needed that prototype. If he could secure the AI chip, he could sell it to a competitor for enough cash to flee the country and start over. He'd leave the debt, the lawsuit, and Isabella behind. Come on, pick up, he hissed. The line clicked. This is Sebastian. Liam froze. Sebastian? Who is this? I called my lead engineer. You called the number for the man you knew as Mark. The voice on the other end said, cool and amused. But that was just a role I played, Liam. My name is Sebastian Sterling, Isabella's cousin. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. You were in on it? The whole time? In on it? I orchestrated the tech architecture based on Isabella's designs, Sebastian replied. Did you really think you were the genius behind Nexus Dynamics? You can barely code in Python, Liam. Bella did the heavy lifting at night while you were networking at bars. I just implemented her work. And by the way, the server you think holds the prototype? It's been wiped, formatted, Gone. You can't do that. That's corporate sabotage, Liam screamed, spit flying from his lips. It's not sabotage if the intellectual property belongs to Sterling Global, Sebastian said. Check your employment contract, Clause 14B. All IP created using Sterling-affiliated funding remains the property of the grantor. You signed it without reading it 3 years ago because you were too busy staring at your new Porsche. The line went dead. Liam stared at the phone, his breathing jagged. He was cornered. Suddenly, the door opened again. It wasn't Isabella. It was a team of 4 security guards, led by the building's head of security, a man named Brock, who had always been friendly to Liam. Today, Brock's face was stone. Mr. Rutherford, Brock said, stepping forward, we've been instructed to escort you from the premises. Escort me? Liam laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. I'm the CEO. This is my building. Not anymore, sir, Brock said, unhooking a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The board of directors just held an emergency vote via conference call. Harrison Sterling holds 51% of the voting shares through shell companies. You've been ousted for gross misconduct and financial liability. You are trespassing. Handcuffs? Liam backed away, knocking over a chair. You can't be serious. The police are waiting downstairs regarding allegations of embezzlement, Brock said calmly. Apparently, there are discrepancies in the company accounts. Personal expenses charged to the business, jewelry, 5-star hotels. Liam's stomach dropped. The bracelet for Tiffany, the weekends in the Hamptons. He had expensed it all, thinking no one would ever check the books of a private company he thought he owned. I need to make a call, Liam gasped. My lawyer. Mr. Leach has already issued a statement distancing himself from you, Brock said. You have the right to remain silent, but I suggest you start walking. Liam bolted. He didn't think. He just reacted. He shoved past the guards, sprinting into the hallway. He knew the service elevator code. He had to get out. He had to get to Tiffany. She had money, or at least, she had the jewelry he'd given her. They could pawn it. They could run. He jammed the button for the garage, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Isabella planned this, he thought, fury warring with panic. She watched me for 3 years. She played the doting wife while she was building a cage around me. As the elevator descended, Liam pulled up his mobile banking app. He needed to transfer whatever cash he had left to an offshore crypto wallet. Login failed. Account frozen. Federal investigation. He tried his personal savings. Account frozen. He tried his credit cards. Card inactive. No, 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 Liam screamed, slamming his fist against the metal wall of the elevator. She took everything. The elevator dinged at the garage level. Liam sprinted toward his reserved spot, where his pride and joy, a silver Aston Martin, was parked. But the spot was empty. In its place stood a tow truck, and a man was currently hooking up the last of Liam's assets. Hey, get away from my car, Liam roared, running toward the driver. The tow truck driver, a burly man with a cigar clamped between his teeth, looked down at a clipboard. Repo order. Payments on the lease are 3 months behind, and the guarantor pulled the plug an hour ago. I am the guarantor, Liam yelled. Paperwork says, Isabella Hart, the driver grunted. She canceled the automatic payments, said something about not paying for a cheater's ride. Tough break, buddy. Liam stood in the empty parking spot, the smell of exhaust fumes choking him. He had nothing. No company, no car, no money. But he still had Tiffany. Tiffany loved him. She had told him so, just this morning. She said he was the most powerful man she'd ever met. She would stand by him. They would fight this together. He ran out of the garage and hailed a taxi. He had a crumpled $20 bill in his pocket, the last of his fortune. Le Bernardin, he barked at the driver. And step on it. Le Bernardin was cool, quiet, and smelled of money. The clinking of silverware and the low hum of polite conversation created a sanctuary of wealth that Liam usually found comforting. Today, it felt like a courtroom. He spotted Tiffany near the window. She was breathtaking, wearing a red dress that hugged every curve, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. She was laughing at something on her phone, a glass of vintage Dom Perignon in her hand. Liam rushed to the table, sweating and disheveled. He hadn't worn a tie since the morning, and his shirt was untucked from his sprint. Liam? Tiffany looked up, her smile faltering. You're late. And, my God, look at you. You look like you ran here. Is everything okay? Liam collapsed into the chair opposite her. Tiffany, listen to me. We have to go. Now. Tiffany frowned, setting down her glass. Go? I just ordered the tasting menu, and another bottle of Dom. What's wrong with you? Isabella, Liam gasped, grabbing her hand. She's not who we thought she was. Tiffany rolled her eyes, pulling her hand away. Don't tell me she refused to sign. Did you have to pay her more? Ugh, she's so desperate. She signed, Liam said, his voice trembling. But Tiffany, she's a Sterling. Harrison Sterling's daughter. Tiffany stared at him blankly. Then she laughed. That's a good one, Liam. The waitress? A billionaire heiress? You're funny when you're stressed? It's true, Liam hissed, leaning across the table. Her father walked in. He owns everything. The company, the apartment, the car. He froze my accounts. He fired me. They're seizing everything. The smile slowly slid off Tiffany's face. The light in her eyes, which Liam had always mistaken for adoration, flickered and died, replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. Wait, she said slowly. Are you saying you're broke? For now, Liam pleaded. Just for now. I can rebuild. I have the skills. But right now, they've locked me out. I need you, Tiff. I need your help. We can go to your place. I can use your accounts to move some crypto around if I can just get a new server set up. We can. Tiffany held up a hand, silencing him. She looked around the restaurant to see if anyone was watching. My place? She said, her voice dropping an octave. Liam, my lease is up next week. You promised to pay the renewal. And my accounts? I have maybe $2,000 to my name. I'm a model, remember? I don't exactly have a 401k. But we have each other, Liam said, reaching for her again. You said you loved me. You said I was your soulmate. Tiffany let out a sigh, the kind one might use when dealing with a slow child. She picked up her purse, a Birkin bag that Liam had bought her last month. Liam, sweetie, she said, standing up. I love the lifestyle. I love the power. I love the way you looked in a suit when you were handing a black card to a waiter. But this? She gestured to his sweaty face and wrinkled clothes. This isn't really my brand. You're leaving me? Liam whispered, shattered. I can't date a broke guy, Liam. It's bad for my image, Tiffany said, checking her reflection in a spoon. Besides, I have a casting call in an hour, or at least, I'm going to find one. She turned to leave, but the waiter arrived at that exact moment, with the bill for the champagne and the appetizers she had already consumed. Monsieur, the waiter said, presenting the leather folder to Liam. Liam stared at it. He knew the bill would be at least $500. He had $20 in his pocket. Liam stammered. Tiffany, can you? Tiffany laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Not my bill, darling. You invited me. She walked away, her heels clicking on the floor, leaving Liam alone with the waiter. Sir? The waiter prompted, his polite demeanor hardening. My cards are compromised. Liam choked out. The waiter signaled to the manager. Within seconds, 2 large men in suits appeared the restaurant's security. Is there a problem? The manager asked, his voice icy. I can't pay, Liam admitted, putting his head in his hands. Call the police, the manager said to the waiter, and escort this gentleman to the back office until they arrive. As Liam was hauled out of his chair, humiliated in front of New York's elite, his phone buzzed. He managed to glance at the screen before the security guard snatched it away. It was a text from an unknown number. Video attachment, live from Times Square. On the screen, a breaking news alert was playing on the massive jumbotron in Times Square. The headline read, Sterling Global Heiress reveals identity, sues ex-husband for fraud. And there, on the biggest screen in the city, was a video of Isabella. She looked regal, powerful, and utterly untouchable. She was holding a press conference. For years, I lived in the shadows to support a man I believed in, Isabella said to the cameras, her voice amplified to the world. But betrayal has a price, and today, the bill is due. Liam watched as the security guard turned the phone off. Move it, the guard growled. Liam was dragged into the kitchen, the smell of dishwater replacing the scent of expensive perfume. He was at rock bottom. But Isabella wasn't done yet. The Manhattan Criminal Court was a far cry from the plush leather chairs of Nexus Dynamics. The air smelled of floor wax and nervous sweat. Liam sat at the defendant's table, clad in a cheap, ill-fitting suit provided by his public defender, a harried woman named Miss Reynolds, who had barely looked at his file. Mr. Rutherford, Judge Holloway boomed, peering over his spectacles. You are charged with 3 counts of corporate embezzlement, 2 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of intellectual property theft. How do you plead? Not guilty, Liam shouted, standing up before Miss Reynolds could stop him. This is a setup. I am a victim of a corporate vendetta, the gallery murmured. Liam turned to look at the benches, hoping to see a friendly face. Maybe a business partner? A friend? Even Tiffany? But the pews were empty of his friends. Instead, the front row was occupied by 3 people. Harrison Sterling sat in the middle, looking like a king on a throne. To his left was Isabella. She wore a tailored navy suit that screamed power, her hair blow-dried to perfection. She looked nothing like the woman who used to scrub his floors. And to her right sat a man Liam recognized, with a jolt of nausea. It was Ethan Caldwell. 5 years ago, before Liam had made his millions, Ethan had been a rival. They had competed for the same internship at a major tech firm. Liam had sabotaged Ethan's final project, deleting key files the night before the presentation to win the spot. Ethan had been disgraced, fired, and blacklisted. Liam had laughed about it for years. Ethan stood up. He wasn't wearing an intern's hoodie anymore. He was wearing a bespoke suit, and he walked with the predatory grace of a man who owned the room. He approached the prosecutor's bench. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the state would like to introduce a special witness for the prosecution regarding the intellectual property theft. Mr. Ethan Caldwell. Liam grabbed his lawyer's arm. Object. That man hates me. He's biased. Sit down, Miss Reynolds hissed. Ethan took the stand. He didn't look at Liam with anger. He looked at him with pity. Mr. Caldwell, the prosecutor asked, can you explain your relationship to the intellectual property in question? The Nexus AI algorithm? Certainly, Ethan said, his voice smooth and clear. After Mr. Rutherford sabotaged my career 5 years ago, I went back to school. I didn't just study law, I studied forensic computer science. I was hired by Sterling Global 3 years ago as their head of cybersecurity and IP protection. Liam's jaw dropped. And, Ethan continued, locking eyes with Liam, I was the one who monitored the servers for Nexus Dynamics. We knew Mr. Rutherford was stealing code from open-source libraries and claiming it as his own. But more importantly, we knew he was embezzling funds to pay for personal entertainment. Ethan pulled out a remote and clicked a button. A screen in the courtroom flickered to life. It was a spreadsheet. A detailed, undeniable list of transactions. Asterisk October 12, $15,000. Cartier item, diamond bracelet. Asterisk November 4, $8,500. The Plaza Hotel, suite. Asterisk December 20, $50,000 cash withdrawal, offshore, transfer. This, Ethan said, pointing to the screen, is the money Liam claimed was for server maintenance. It was actually funneling into an account in the Cayman Islands, an account we have since frozen. Lies, Liam screamed. That was my money. I earned it. Actually, Ethan said, clicking the remote again, the money came from the Series B funding provided by Sterling Global, which makes it federal wire fraud. Judge Holloway slammed his gavel. Order. Mr. Rutherford, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. Ethan stepped down from the stand and walked past the defense table. He paused, leaning in close, so only Liam could hear. You stole my future 5 years ago, Liam, Ethan whispered. I just took yours. Consider us even. The bail hearing was a disaster. The judge set bail at $5 million, an impossible sum for a man whose assets were frozen. Liam was remanded to custody until trial. 2 days later, Liam sat in a small, concrete visitation room at Rikers Island. He wore a gray jumpsuit now. The reality of his situation had set in. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a cold, gnawing terror. The heavy metal door buzzed open. Isabella walked in. She was alone. No guards, no lawyers, no father. She sat down on the metal stool opposite him, separated by a thick pane of glass. She picked up the phone receiver. Liam picked up his side, his hands shaking. "Bella," he croaked, "please, you have to stop this. I can't survive in here. They know who I am. I'm a target." Isabella's face was unreadable. "You should have thought about that before you transferred $50,000 of my father's money to an offshore account, Liam." "I was going to pay it back," Liam lied. "Once the IPO launched, I was going to pay everyone back. I just needed a bridge loan." "There was never going to be an IPO," Isabella said quietly. "Nexus Dynamics was a shell. The technology didn't work, Liam. We knew that." Liam blinked. "What?" "No, the prototype. Sebastian said it was working." "Sebastian, my cousin, wrote a script to simulate success," Isabella revealed. "The AI barely functioned. We kept it running to see how long you would fake it, to see if you would ever come to me and ask for help honestly, to see if you would ever admit you were drowning." Liam felt like he had been punched in the gut. You set me up to fail?" "No," Isabella said firmly. "I gave you a ladder. You chose to use it to hit people instead of climbing. I gave you a wife who supported you. You chose a mistress who drained you. I gave you a life, Liam. You chose a lie." She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. She pressed it against the glass. It was a photo of them from 3 years ago. They were sitting on the floor of their first apartment, eating pizza out of a box. Liam looked happy then, genuinely happy. "Do you remember this?" Isabella asked, her voice cracking slightly. "This was the night you promised me that money wouldn't change us. You said, 'As long as I have you, Bella, I'm the richest man in the world.'" Tears welled up in Liam's eyes. He remembered. He had meant it then. Or he thought he did. "I still love you," Liam whispered, a desperate final gambit. "I do. I lost my way, Bella. But I love you. Please, drop the charges. I'll sign anything. I'll go away. Just don't leave me in here." Isabella looked at him for a long, agonizing minute. For a second, Liam thought he saw her resolve waver. He saw the waitress who used to massage his shoulders after a long day. Then she slowly lowered the photo. "The Isabella you loved is gone, Liam," she said, her voice hardening into steel. "You killed her the day you laughed while signing those divorce papers. You didn't just break my heart. You insulted my intelligence. And you disrespected my family." She stood up. "Ethan and I are refiling the civil suit tomorrow," she said. "We're going after your future earnings, too. If you ever get out of here, every dime you make until you're 80 will go to a charity of my choice. Specifically, a charity that helps women restart their lives after financial abuse." "Bella, wait!" Liam shouted, banging the receiver against the glass. "Don't do this. You can't leave me with nothing." Isabella turned at the door. She looked back at him one last time. "You have exactly what you had when you met me, Liam," she said. "Potential. Let's see if you can do anything with it this time, without a Sterling holding your hand." The door buzzed. She walked out. Liam sat alone in the silence, the receiver dangling from his hand. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He didn't see a CEO. He didn't see a visionary. He saw a man who had been handed the world on a silver platter and had thrown it in the trash for a fake diamond. He hung up the phone. The guard stepped in. "Time's up, Rutherford. Back to the cell." As Liam was led away, the news played on a small TV in the guard booth. Breaking news. Sterling Global announces new CEO. Isabella Sterling to take the helm, with Ethan Caldwell named as Chief Legal Officer. Stock prices soar. Liam watched as Isabella shook hands with the board of directors. Ethan smiling by her side. They looked unstoppable. And Liam Rutherford realized, for the first time, that the drama wasn't just a story. It was his life. And the credits were rolling. 5 years later. The November rain in New York City felt different when you were poor. It didn't feel like a romantic backdrop for a jazz song, or a reason to stay in bed with a lover. It felt like an assault. It was a cold gray sheet that soaked through the thin soles of cheap shoes and settled into your bones. Liam Rutherford stood under the awning of the service entrance at the Pierre Hotel, shaking the water from his umbrella, a broken $3 thing he'd bought from a street vendor. He wasn't wearing a bespoke Italian suit, tailored to hide his flaws anymore. He was wearing a polyester vest that smelled faintly of industrial detergent and someone else's sweat, a white shirt that chafed his neck, and black trousers that were hemmed an inch too short. It had been 5 years since the gavel fell, 24 months in a minimum security facility, upstate for wire fraud, and embezzlement had been the easy part. Prison was boring, but at least he had a routine. The real punishment began the day he walked out. The judge, in a fit of poetic justice, had enforced the Sterling Clause in his sentencing. 40% of Liam's gross wages for the next 15 years were automatically garnished to repay the investors he had defrauded. He was blacklisted, radioactive. No tech company in Silicon Valley, or even a startup in a garage, would touch him. Doing a Rutherford had become business school shorthand for a CEO who crashed a company through hubris. So, the visionary, the genius, the man who once graced the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Next Titan," was now working for a temp agency called Staff Sure. Tonight was a high-stakes gig, the annual New Horizons charity gala. It paid double time because the clientele was demanding, and the hours were long. Liam didn't know who was hosting it, and frankly, he didn't care. He just needed the cash to pay for the heat in his basement studio in Queens. He pushed through the heavy service doors, the noise of the kitchen hitting him like a physical blow, clattering pans, shouting chefs, the hiss of steam. He clocked in, grabbed a silver tray, and checked his reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door. His face was thinner now, lines of bitterness etched deep around his mouth. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was graying at the temples and thinning on top. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had lost everything. "Rutherford, table 12, needs champagne. Move it," the floor manager barked. Liam flinched, his old arrogance flaring up for a split second before being crushed by necessity. "Yes, sir." He walked out into the ballroom, and the breath left his lungs. It was a world he used to own. The chandeliers dripped with crystals the size of fists. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffles, and old money. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the music weaving through the laughter of the city's elite. Liam moved through the crowd like a ghost. He kept his head down, offering drinks with a mumbled, "Champagne, sir?" He saw faces. He recognized venture capitalists he had pitched to, rivals he had insulted, women he had flirted with. None of them looked at him. To them, he was part of the furniture, a hand holding a tray, invisible. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers, silencing the room. "Please take your seats. It is time to welcome the woman of the hour, the visionary who has turned tragedy into triumph, the chairwoman of the Sterling Foundation and the CEO of Sterling Global, Isabella Sterling Caldwell." The tray in Liam's hand rattled. The crystal flutes chimed against each other, a nervous, fragile sound. He froze near a pillar, hidden in the shadows, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Isabella. The spotlight swept across the stage, and there she was. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of shimmering emerald green silk that flowed around her like liquid money. Diamonds sparkled at her throat and ears, catching the light with every movement. But it wasn't the clothes that struck Liam. It was her posture. The slouch she used to have, the one she adopted to make Liam feel taller, to make him feel like the protector was gone. She stood with her shoulders back, her chin high, radiating a terrifying, serene power. And she wasn't alone. Walking beside her, his hand resting possessively and protectively on the small of her back, was Ethan Caldwell. Liam felt bile rise in his throat. Ethan looked older, too, but in the good way distinguished, solid, successful. He looked at Isabella, not with the hungry, calculating eyes of a man who wanted a trophy, but with the steady, adoring gaze of a partner. "Thank you all for coming," Isabella said into the microphone. Her voice was clear, resonant, and devoid of the hesitation Liam remembered. 5 years ago, I started this foundation to help women who had been financially abused and silenced. I wanted to turn my own scars into a shield for others. Today, I am proud to announce that we have raised over $50 million. The crowd erupted in applause. A thunderous ovation. $50 million. The exact amount Liam had tried to steal, the amount he had ruined his life for. She had raised it for charity. She had built an empire on the ashes of his betrayal. "I couldn't have done this without my rock," Isabella continued, smiling up at Ethan. "My husband, Ethan. And, of course, the true boss of the family." She pointed to the front row. Harrison Sterling was sitting there, looking frailer but happier than Liam had ever seen him. On his lap sat a toddler, a little boy with messy dark hair and bright eyes, clapping his chubby hands. "My son, Noah," Isabella beamed. The room melted away for Liam. A son, a legacy, a family. It was everything he could have had, if he had just been honest, if he had just signed the papers with dignity, if he had just loved her for who she was, instead of what she could give him. He couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. He had to get out. He couldn't watch this. He couldn't watch the life he threw away being lived by the man he hated. He turned sharply. Blinded by tears he refused to let fall. He rushed toward the service exit, his movements jagged and desperate. Crash. In his haste, he didn't see the guest stepping backward to take a photo. Liam collided with him hard. The tray slipped from his sweaty, trembling fingers. A dozen crystal flutes shattered onto the marble floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the hushed room. The music stopped. The applause died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. "You idiot!" the guest shouted, brushing champagne off his tuxedo. "Look what you did. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Liam dropped to his knees, panic seizing him. If he lost this job, he lost his apartment. He began frantically picking up the shards of glass with his bare hands, slicing his fingers, blood mixed with the spilled champagne. "I'll clean it up, please. I'll pay for the cleaning. Don't report me." He was groveling. The man who once commanded boardrooms was now on his knees, begging a stranger for mercy over a dry cleaning bill. "It's all right." A gentle voice cut through the tension. "Accidents happen. Give him some space." The crowd parted. A pair of emerald green heels stopped inches from Liam's bleeding hands. Liam froze. He knew those shoes. He knew that voice. He slowly lifted his head, his neck creaking with the effort. Isabella stood over him. She had come down from the stage to check on the commotion. Ethan was a step behind her, his hand on her elbow, looking concerned. Isabella looked down at the kneeling waiter. Her eyes scanned his face, the gray hair, the lines of stress, the cheap uniform, the blood on his hands. For a moment, there was a flicker of confusion. She didn't recognize the broken man at her feet. Then, her gaze landed on the small white scar above his left eyebrow, the one he got falling off a bike in Central Park on their second date. Her eyes widened slightly. The recognition hit her. Liam stopped breathing. He waited for it. He waited for the anger. He waited for her to scream, to point, to tell the security guards that this was the monster who tried to rob her father. He waited for the validation that he was still the villain of her story, that he still mattered enough to be hated. But Isabella didn't scream. She didn't frown. She didn't smile. She looked at Liam Rutherford, the man she had once vowed to love until death, and her face went completely blank. The tension left her shoulders. There was no spark of hatred, no flare of triumph. There was just nothing. She reached into her small, beaded clutch. She pulled out a crisp, $100 bill. "Here," she said softly, her voice kind but distant, the way one speaks to a stranger in a subway station. "For the trouble. And please, be careful with the glass. You don't want to hurt yourself. She placed the bill gently on his tray, which was resting on the floor amidst the ruin. She didn't say his name. She didn't ask how he was. She didn't acknowledge their past. She didn't need to. He was no longer a chapter in her book. He was a footnote she had already forgotten. Come on, Bella, Ethan whispered, guiding her away. Noah is getting fussy. Coming, she said brightly. She turned her back on him. She took her husband's arm, and they walked back toward their table, laughing at something the little boy had done. Liam remained on his knees in the center of the ballroom, clutching the $100, the blood from his finger smeared onto Benjamin Franklin's face. That was the true revenge. It wasn't the prison sentence. It wasn't the poverty. It was the fact that she had looked him in the eye and felt absolutely nothing. Hate would have meant he still had power over her. Indifference meant he was dead. Liam Rutherford watched the woman he lost dance with the man she deserved. The music swelled back up, the conversation resumed, and the world moved on, leaving him exactly where he belonged, alone on the floor, picking up the broken pieces of a life he had shattered himself. And that is how the mighty fall. Liam Rutherford believed that power was defined by a title, a corner office, and a hefty bank account. He thought people were disposable, tools to be used and discarded on his climb to the top. But he learned the hard way that true power isn't about what you own, it's about who you are. Isabella didn't need his money to be a queen. She was royalty in denim, just as she was in diamonds. Liam, on the other hand, was a pauper even when he wore a Rolex. In the end, the sweetest revenge wasn't the lawsuit, the bankruptcy, or the prison time. It was the moment Isabella looked at him and felt absolutely nothing. Hate is not the opposite of love. Indifference is. Liam became a ghost in his own life, haunted by the memory of the happiness he traded for a lie. Wow, what a journey. That was the story of Isabella and Liam. It's a brutal reminder that karma has no deadline, and that you should never judge a book or a waitress by the cover. I want to know what you think. If you were Isabella, would you have helped Liam up at the end? Or would you have had security throw him out? Do you think he deserved the Sterling clause, garnishing his wages forever? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and drama, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy revenge saga coming up next week, involving a cheating lottery winner that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.